discussion, please take this chance to ask. The microphones are there available, and if people on the back want to ask questions, you can come forward. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all those presentations. I just wanted to ask briefly about the issue of the sense of entitlement, because we're talking about the success of those of an immigrant background who may be second, third generation. And in my experience, as far as I can tell, a lot has to do with a sense of entitlement, the student or the person feeling and having the self-confidence and the sense of belonging, which is really important. When I went to secondary school, I was born and raised in London. I wanted to do law. I had a careers advisor, a state-appointed careers advisor that came into my school and sat down with me and said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to do law." He said, "Well, you know, you need to do A-levels, you need to do an academic route for that. That's a bit difficult. Why don't you go down the vocational route?" And I knew there's nothing wrong with the vocational route. I could have chosen to do that, but I wanted to do law, and here was a careers advisor that was saying to me, well, discouraging me from doing that. I did my law degree, I did my master's, I qualified as a barrister, so forth years later, but I was able to say, well, no, you know what, I want to do law, I want to do this, because I felt that I had the right to do it. But I hear so many students that don't feel that they have the right to be able to do that. And I think that that's so important, that we're able to instill that capability in our children, in our youth, whatever disadvantaged background they come from. But I feel that that's a key indicator of success. So my question is, perhaps more so the gentleman that presented last, I think, about the visa, is whether or not there's any indicators that you can measure that looks at this sense of entitlement. I know it's very difficult to measure, it's not like tests, but is there anything that you can develop, any sets of measures that can look at this? Thank you.
Maybe I want to collect a few questions and then ask the spot. Yeah, there's 2%.
I don't have a microphone, but I'd like to answer your question. Just, if I may, we just finished a study on the impact of socioeconomic and ethnic segregation in primary education in Flanders on school achievement. And what we saw was that the impact of socioeconomic segregation impacts on what we have called teachability culture, and that impacts on what we've called futility culture and a sense of futility among students. Yes, so you can measure that clearly, and we've seen that that clearly impacts school success, and it also impacts cognitive aspects of children in general, and specifically migrant children.
Thank you. Yes, please.
My name is Elena Kabucheva. I'm coming from Health and Social Development Foundation in Bulgaria, and I will draw your attention to Roma education and policy in this field. I was so pleased to hear the speech of the Mr. Pierre Maurice, and he actually described a very positive changes in the policy that make these efforts and funding much more effective. We're a multidisciplinary and multi-ethnic organization, and we have a lot of experience in finding the most appropriate approaches for Roma integration, and we deal for a long time with early child development and care and education. And I would like to confirm that there is no other field, there is no other age where it is so easy to achieve so high results, so high effectiveness, and so high how to say, recognition and rewards. And actually it is proven that the more isolated and marginalized is one community, the more it benefits from early child education. But I would like to add some things that are equally important. It is clear it will be priority, but it should be combined with additional involvement of parents of these children. And it was very nicely shown from the PISA presentation that preparedness and home environment is very important. So I would like to say that in communities where the resources are very limited, we have to combine with some kind of education of parents about children's needs of development and how to support them. Otherwise, if we will have only education for children with sufficient support for family, it will, the whole effectiveness during the whole path of education will be very weak. And furthermore, because many big part of this community live in a very difficult situation, and they started to create their marriages very early, at 14, 15 years old, in extreme poverty. And talking about parents, we have to start also with future parents, because it is a little bit late to offer early education to children of these 14, 15-year-olds extremely poor. But this is another good news that, okay, we started with 14 years age, 7, it was always late for education. But to change their ideas how to be better parents, how to make some family planning, some crucial idea about responsible parenting, because for sure these parents actually would like to be successful as parents and to have successful children. And this type of social skills, I mean communication, value clarification, this type of things, it changed very quickly their idea how I try to create family and children. Yeah. And so another issue that...
I think it's an important contribution, but I also want to collect one more question, so we will come back to it.
No, the final is that I would like to say this, I don't know whether there are people from the community, but this is important to have this kind of supportive measures that make effectiveness in order to, when they formulate structural funds, how to spend structural funds. It's very limited, then the effectiveness will be very limited.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a question in the back there and here in the front, and then we have to go back to that.
My question is actually quite simple. Why is it so difficult to put policy into practice?
Yeah, good question.
And you have some of the best brains in the business in front of you, gentlemen. And though your facts and figures have been extremely interesting this morning, some of the issues that Dr. Ardem was looking at about asking people about their own experiences and how they managed to get through the migration barrier, they are actually sitting in front of you. And you could have asked them, maybe, to have started this dialogue off. And it would help immensely if there was a forum to be able to do that. And I came to this conference hoping that some of that would come across from that.
We will address that in this conference.
Sorry?
We will certainly address that in this conference.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it, and I'm just thanking you. But I still haven't got an answer to my question. So please.
I have some comments on that. I have to give this lady the floor at last, because we have to go to lunch.
Thank you. I think mine is a follow-up question probably for Thomas specifically.
Please use the microphone, otherwise you can't.
Okay, sir. My question is to Thomas. It can be considered as a follow-up question from the previous one, actually. I come from a maths and engineering background and quite interested in migration issues, integration issues as well. And I really like methods like MyPace because of the engineering approach that it has inside it. So it helps me to understand the parameters a lot better. And I started to hear about MyPace more and more often, so it looks like the new trend in this area. I just want to know whether there is any procedures to transfer the findings of MyPace specifically to more to grassroots level or to more more functional level. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I want to take up one. Yeah, sorry. Maybe you come to it if we have time. I'll come back to you. I promise. I want to just say 1 minute to the gentleman in the back that raised the question: why are we not hearing about the stories of the successful people here of immigrant descent? That's been for 15 years my topic of research, but I didn't want to bring up that research because we have important contributions. I've worked together with Adam Kunshu, especially with role models, how to develop them into a methodology for mentor projects. These mentor projects are now in practice in the Netherlands, and thousands of pupils are being mentored by role models. So there is also from the side of research interest in these issues. I also advised my ministry on early tracking, partly because of this research on school careers of successful youth, and now they have made the system more permeable. That's one reason why now more people are able to go to higher education. So there is research and interest in these issues, and I think researchers should collaborate with people from the immigrant communities to make these things happen. So I think it is a valuable contribution, but we will address this, I think, also by going to the schools and hearing about experiences of school support projects in this country. I want to give the floor and then Thomas to react to some of maybe we have still time.
Well, PISA in general is an international study, so we don't go into details of what is happening in schools. We just give data for all countries. We have some evidence of things like you mentioned are happening in many countries, and it's not only about students with an immigrant background, but also disadvantaged students. And for example, this study I mentioned from Germany, showing that students who are placed in vocational schools actually shouldn't be there. And those who shouldn't be there are usually with an immigrant background or are from disadvantaged background. So they basically have very good skills. They should be in academic track. They should go to higher education, have their law degree, but they are placed in vocational schools. And you can compare countries according to these aspects. Another measure we have, which is very interesting, if you look at it, we ask students about their career expectations. So we basically ask them if they want to be lawyers or they want to be somewhere else. And then from there you can see that there is hardly any relationships between what students claim they want to become and their performance, so the level of skills, and that you can mostly explain that by stereotypes. We are mostly working on gender, so basically comparing boys and girls, but I'm pretty sure you can find similar things with students with disadvantaged backgrounds or disadvantaged students, that basically it's not what students know, it's what students believe they can do or should do, which is important for how they think about their future career. So you can compare that in PISA, you have a measure from what they really know, what they can do, and what they think they do, and they are not really usually related. So I think it's a very complex issue. I can't tell you the story how it interacts, for example, with what teacher or career advisors are doing at schools, but it's quite clear the system of this is not working properly in many countries. So they are not really advising properly students of what they should and can do, and we have some evidence on this.
Other questions you want to comment?
Right, so how to turn policies into practice? Well, that's actually up to you. How we do this in MyPEX is we give a common piece of information around the table, and we do national events with stakeholders in areas to get them then to evaluate what needs to be done to fill the gaps. So MyPEX tells you what's available, but then you have to read MyPEX against your own situation and look at the real outcomes that are gathered in your country to say, well, what do we need to do? Do we need to change the policy? Or do we need to better implement it with better funding, for example, or with a whole new way of working? And then you can start to set either targets to change the policy or targets to change the funding or the implementation and monitor those change in outcomes over time. The stakeholders are out there, I have to say, from going country to country. What's missing is the systematic gathering of information by those stakeholders on how the implementation is working in their own countries. And as was suggested by my colleague from the OECD, it's really a shame that PISA is in many countries the only way of monitoring the outcomes of immigrant children. And it's really a shame that there is not a MyPEX that's looking at each country and how there is a difference of implementation between different schools or between different cities. So if the stakeholders in those countries were more serious about this, NGOs and policymakers, they would create these ways of getting data on the gaps. And then obviously, I think as they work, they would realize that what they do is they work to fill gaps. I mean, NGOs exist because there are gaps, because people fall outside of systems. That's why we need NGOs. So I think that, as I said, the stakeholders are there. We need more systematic gathering of information on implementation. And then maybe stakeholders can be more ambitious and say, this is the target we want to set within our own countries. You asked about how we involve these kinds of stakeholders ourselves. We have the national events. We work with national partners. But just to raise your awareness, on May 9th, we're publishing a survey called the Immigrant Citizens Survey, where we asked 7,500 immigrants in 16 EU cities about their experience of integration policies and what they would like to see in many areas. So there are other mechanisms of research, as you suggest, that can be used to bring in expert or individuals' experiences of implementation.
Just one thing about self-confidence. I think we have to be careful about it. We can be also overconfident. Sometimes parents dream about their children, and they have dreams for their children. When my father asked me when I was 5 years old what I wanted to become, I wanted to please him, and I said, I want to become president. I'm still not president. President of the Confederation, yes, maybe, but sometimes these expectations can become also destructive, because if there is no match between your prestations and your dreams, it is depressing. And I saw many, many children around me when I was working in the Netherlands who wanted to please their parents, but didn't want to study in this direction. They didn't want to become economists. In general, parents in the Netherlands, especially Turkish parents, think you can become rich by becoming economists. But the child wanted to become something else. I think the role of schools is indeed to help these children to understand what they want to become, what they really want to become, and how we can help them to achieve what they want to become. I just wanted to add this to this discussion.
So this is what I tried to say also, that PISA basically shows not only that those who have very good skills are, for example, placed in vocational schools, but also those who have very low skills are often saying that they want to become, managers and things like that. So it just shows that in many countries, when it comes to students with immigrant background, the disadvantaged students, these expectations are unrealistic, and there is of course a lot of evidence that it's not a good outcome of the school system, because then students are becoming frustrated when they can't achieve what they think they can, but so we have some evidence.
But one more thing about the expectations of schools. schools, in general, the expectation of schools from immigrant children is different than the autochthonous children. They expect less from immigrant children than autochthonous. And this can be reason for many, many problems later on. Especially in the Netherlands, there is what we call the CITO tests. And at the CITO tests, and the advice of the teachers to go to, I will say, to schools where the quality is less, is well known. I have difficulties today to express myself. I have a headache, my apologies for it, but I think you understand what I want to say. Expectations of parents, expectations of pupils, and expectations of schools. They don't match.
I think we do have time for a last question.
Yes. I'm from Durban. I have a very, oh sorry. This is quite important that I expect from having it from, especially at the end of this conference. I'm not going much credibility to PISA results on the sense of, especially you said, immigrant children choose concentration schools. But my opinion is, as an acculturation theorist, we just look at the immigrant students, but the indigenous community, especially in not only Belgium, but in mid-Europe, host community members do not want their children to get education with migrant children. So when you look at from only one perspective, it won't reflect the reality. I have a research about 800 people from both sides, from Flemish, Brazilian and Turkish side. So when I think of the results, I will just support and will be interested in as something really new with Thomas Hardison side of flourishing the community. What do they bring and how do they support the community? I'm going to not ask, maybe wish, but how can we bring out all these targeted needs of the migrants from looking from both perspectives, because it's never a solo dance, I insist on this. And how can we make in intercultural societies use these new opportunities? What do you think, or what are the expectations of parents, and what are our duties from all actors? Thank you very much.
No, I think it's an important question. You have to take all the actors.
Question, as you say, yeah, take all the actors into account. Well, that's where I would say that you need to have reflections of those actors. You need to bring them together through a series of discussions where you privilege the knowledge that they bring and not just see, let's say, researchers as producers of knowledge and practitioners as users of knowledge, but actually see practitioners as also producers of knowledge and insight. That's often missing in the kinds of research that we see, although there is going to be an emerging European network that's going to be looking at migrant education, where indeed practitioners are being thought of as well as producers of knowledge. So I agree with you there. But you raise a bigger question, which I don't know how to answer, which is about how do we bring out the specific needs, who identifies them? And as was suggested already, I think there is perhaps less thinking in the education system about who those people should be. Also in terms of the training that people should receive in the education system to identify specific needs. There are courses out there in teaching training institutes, but are they required? Are they required of all teachers? Are they good enough? And then who in the classroom is best situated? And you see very different people given that job country by country, and sometimes it is just the person who teaches language, and that's assumed that this person therefore has a greater knowledge. As I mentioned, we only found 2 countries, France and Luxembourg, where you have centers of expertise that are sought out and where newcomers can go to get a more full picture. But as I said, normally this is left to schools, and for me the structures are very unclear of who is really good at identifying not just the needs when someone arrives, but also throughout the whole process. And that is perhaps interesting for further research.
Okay, then then I will ask the chair to round up this session and say probably some practical things about lunch and further.
Yes, I think we can all join in thanking the speakers and panelists of this morning. I think this was a very good start of our conference, and I think they will be also rewarded in some way. Thank you very much. You have noticed that we have caught up part of our time lag, but we will be very strict in starting again this afternoon, because the site visits require the necessary amount of time, so we will leave from this place at 1 p.m. sharp. This means that our lunch break will be reduced by approximately 15 to 20 minutes. Just keep in mind those among the audience who want to go on site visits. We gather outside the building at Place du Luxembourg, but you will be guided there by people with the blue shirts and the hosts and hostesses from this conference. At 1 p.m. sharp, we gather at Place du Luxembourg to take the bus to the site visits. We will now have lunch right outside this room here. You will immediately find out where. Thank you very much. Anything else? There is now a small thanking ceremony for the